Ray Ray, can you hear me? I'm grateful for you, brother. Every time I see you, my heart smiles. And I just wanted to say thank you to God that you're now another grandfather and that you're present and available to your family now because of what God has done in your life.
Indeed, thank you.
All right.
Somebody else want to say something you're thankful for? Go ahead, good and loud, talk way over there.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to thank God for being who He is, you know, and offering Himself to us, inviting us, you know, to commune at His table, but who He is, because what He desires for us is so, you know, beyond what we can even imagine, you know what I mean? And He's a fun person. He's friendly.
Yes. All right, somebody else, somebody want to be thankful for?
Where's your foil hat, everybody?
Good and loud, Chance.
I thank God for another day of living. Thank God He gave me another day of chance. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Ray Ray.
Thank God for His patience with me and His love that He had for me. And I thank God for all of you all, and I thank God for the support and love that I get from a lot of you all in here.
Yes.
All right. Somebody else? Laurel, good and loud so Ray Ray can hear you.
I just want to say thank God that for His wonderful love and forgiveness every day.
All right. Anybody else? Sadiq.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, which means I thank God. I thank God for the love of Allah which flows down through Mark and Liz and Pastor Dave, through us here this day and sharing this love with each another as we are brothers and sisters from the same Father.
Thank you. Wonderful. Somebody else?
I'm grateful for Liz and Mark and for Barb, and I'm grateful for my relationship with God today.
Anybody else? Want to thank God? Please, good and loud.
My name is Jade, and I just like to thank God, you know, for everything, like for guiding me and for giving me my sobriety and my life back. Because, like for the first time in the past lot of years, like the first time I feel like I can control my addiction and that I'm on the right path, and I know I'm gonna make it. You know,
Amen.
It's like I have this overwhelming feeling of like happiness, like I never felt this before. So
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, somebody else. Doug.
I'm thankful that I have my soul, you know, that you know, mind, feelings, and existence. And Jesus Christ is the reality of my existence. I'm just so thankful for that, you know. And I have a spirit, you know. The spirit's important, you know, having a living spirit. And you know, when you're saved, if you're saved to the flesh, to the carnal mind, it makes no sense. You have to have a living spirit to be born again. And I said that all along, and I'll never change my belief in that.
All right, thank you. All right, go. Good and loud so Ray Ray can hear you.
Okay, Ray Ray, I thank God for Staff Sergeant Aaron Mills, who pushed me back on the hill in Colombia, saved my life, and said God's not done with you.
Wow. Oh, indeed. Somebody else want to say something? Liz, good and loud so Ray Ray can hear you.
I'm thankful for the diversity of this group and the example that we show that, you know, that the world can take a look at, because we all don't have to be the same. We can be different, and we can all love one another.
All right. Good job. Somebody else? Want to say something? Don't want to leave anybody out if you want to.
Liz probably wants to stay.
All right.
Okay, I'll say.
Okay.
I want to thank God for His presence and for His promises and for giving us the Spirit that we all have. And we're rejoicing that the perfect plan is still there, and it has been there and will be there.
Come on,
And for
Helen.
this beautiful
Bring it up.
and the atmosphere is beautiful.
There you go, girl.
Thank you. Thank you.
Say it, everyone.
All right. Anybody else? Go once.
What about you?
So I'm going to go third. Twice. All right. Well, I am profoundly thankful. You know, after being a pastor all these years, this is one thing that I know. You can never tell from anybody's life what's really going on. And sometimes they're profoundly difficult things. And I just am thankful that in my life, in the good times and in the difficult times, and in the lives of people that I know, in the good times and difficult times, that God still pours out His love. It doesn't change a bit. And I'm thankful that that love never changes for me. He's so good. So, all right, so we're going to sing this song. It's a simple song. It's just called God is So Good.
Amen. Good. I don't want anything to go to waste. I'm going to stand here, and if you can't hear me, let me know. So I want to start with a question tonight. What the following people have in common: Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft; Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook; Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon; and Gideon, the military leader, judge, and prophet of the Old Testament. What do these people have in common?
No, they all got authority.
They're all rich.
They all died or they're gonna die.
They are all world changers.
Yes.
They're all world changers. They all have had an impact on the world. The other thing they have in common, every one of them started out as a nerd. Every one of them started out as a nerd that no one thought would ever amount to anything close to what they amounted to. Now, I'm going to get around to the spiritual part here in a minute. Most Christians feel that they themselves are spiritual nerds. They're sincerely interested in drawing closer to Jesus. They want to be like Him, and they want to be able to relate to their world in the way that He did. But they suffer from spiritual low self-esteem. We say things like, I can't teach the Bible. I don't have the patience to minister to people. I don't have the resources to support ministry efforts. I felt this way for a lot of years. Not being sure about where to start serving, although I wanted to start serving, and how to start serving. It was easy just to live life with my own personal Jesus and let somebody else do the heavy lifting. And so that's what I did for a long time. But I can tell you without any reservation that this isn't what God intends for us. He doesn't want us to just cruise along with our own personal Jesus and let somebody else do the heavy spiritual lifting. He's not into laissez-faire Christianity, where we just coast and we let our spiritual lives take their own course. That's not what He wants. In fact, His last instructions to His disciples before He ascended into heaven, as reported in Acts 1:8, are as follows. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria, and even to the remotest part of the earth. So note that Jesus said, you shall be. This is not the great suggestion. This is the Great Commission, and it's a command to all of us. You shall be my witnesses. This is what He wants for us. So this is the dilemma we all face. God wants us all to be world changers. But naturally, we're all spiritual nerds and we're afraid of failing. That was what held me back, afraid of failing. But fear not, God does have a solution. And tonight we're going to look at one example, one case of how God solved that problem in the life of a spiritual nerd in the Old Testament by the name of Gideon. So tonight we're going to be in chapter 6 of the book of Judges, the Old Testament book of Judges, verses 11 through 16. 5 verses, 5 short verses. I want to give you a little bit of background before we dive into it, though, about the book of Judges. The book of Judges really is a history book. It traces the history of Israel from about 1380 BC to about 1050 BC. So it was a very turbulent period in the history of Israel. This was the period where the Israelites were conquering the Promised Land. This was between the time that they took the Promised Land and the time of the first king, the first monarchy under King Saul. The book of Judges tells us of many conflicts that surrounded Israel's effort to conquer the Promised Land and to subdue it. Judges describes many times in graphic detail the warfare and all the drama that went along with it.
Which chapter is that again?
6. We're in chapter 6 of Judges, John. You know, in the book of Judges, there's a cycle, and it just repeats over and over and over again. It starts with Israel serving the Lord, and then Israel falls into idolatry, and then Israel is enslaved by some foreign force, and then Israel cries out to God, God raises up a judge, and then Israel is delivered. And just when they get to delivery, the cycle starts over again. And you see that cycle time and time again throughout the book of Judges. Now, one of the enemies of Israel in the book of Judges was Midian, the Midianites. And the Midianites were a nomadic tribe, and they were descendant of Abraham, just like the Israelites, but they were a result of his union with his concubine Keturah. They were not the children of Sarah, they were the children of the concubine, and they were a historic enemy of Israel. And they, along with the others, invaded Israel and tried to be an impediment to Israel taking control and subduing the Promised Land. Gideon was the unlikely judge that God raised up to be a world changer during this period and to defeat Midian. So this was Gideon's charge from God. Become a world changer and defeat Midian. So I want to read the 5 or so verses, and then we'll go through it verse by verse, and I'll get to the point here. Starting in verse 11, Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. Then Gideon said to him, O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our father told us about, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. The Lord looked at him and said, Go in this your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? He said to him, O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house. But the Lord said to him, Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man. Curious passage, but now we're going to dive through it verse by verse and get the meaning out of it, and it's really pretty significant. Starting in verse 11, Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak tree. Any time in the Old Testament where you see the phrase, the angel of the Lord, that's believed to be the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. So the Old Testament is all about Jesus. The Old Testament's purpose was to prepare Israel for the coming of the Messiah. And Jesus appears throughout the Old Testament, and one of the places he appears is right here in chapter 6 of Judges. Now, we're also told in verse 11 that Gideon was the son of Joash. And as we'll see later, Joash was an idol worshiper. So not only was Gideon a nerd, he had a horrible upbringing. He was raised by an idol worshiper. He didn't have a lot of chance, but be that as it may, we'll see what came of it. Now, interestingly, in verse 11, we're told that Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. So I ask, what is wrong with this picture? Typically, wheat is threshed on an elevated threshing floor. And in this area, it was a hilly area, the logical place for a threshing floor would have been up on the hillside where the wind could blow the chaff out of the wheat. So Typically, on the other hand, the wine press would be down at the bottom of the hill, close to the vines. So when the grapes were harvested, they could be taken right into the wine press. So Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press rather than on a threshing floor. And I really see that as a complete act of desperation. He was scared to death that the Midianites were going to attack and take the little bit of wheat that he was threshing. So it starts out in just a really, really deplorable situation. So with that background, we go into verse 12, where the angel of the Lord, this is Jesus, appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." So while this guy is threshing wheat in a wine press, scared to death, why would Jesus call him a valiant warrior? O valiant warrior. Well, it's because Jesus doesn't see us the way that man sees us. Man looks at the outward appearance. A man would look at Gideon and would know he was a wimp. Jesus looked at Gideon and saw right into his heart and saw the potential that he had. And he does that with all of us. So about the time that we're thrashing ourselves and beating ourselves down, we need to remember that Jesus doesn't see us the way man sees us, and doesn't see us even as we see ourselves. He sees our hearts. He looks right into our hearts and sees what our hearts are like and sees what our potential is like. Now, one of the reminders of this whole concept is what the Apostle Paul told us in 1 Corinthians 1:27. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the strong. So you might ask, why does God do this? Why does he choose the weak things in the world to shame the wise, and or shame the strong, and the foolish things of the world to shame the wise? Well, he does this so that when he does a great work, there is no doubt about who's doing it. It's not the fool, it's not the weak guy, it's God working through that person. It's simple, really. So we go to verse 13. Jesus says to Gideon, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." Then Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." So Gideon's response to the old valiant warrior is really very predictably human. He starts complaining. It's what we typically do. He said, as God is with us, why did he let this happen to us? Why did he let Midian attack us? Where are all the miracles? I mean, this is the God that closed the Red Sea on the advancing Egyptians. What about a miracle now? And in fact, God has abandoned us and he's given us into the hand of the Midianites. So Gideon was doing what we all do, complaining about what God isn't doing in our lives. We all do it. I do it. Feeling down. God, oh God, why? Why aren't you doing this in my life? It's just a typically human thing. The crazy thing here, though, is that Gideon is actually complaining about God to God. That's the nutty thing. This is Jesus talking to him, and he's complaining about Jesus to his face. At least he's an honest person. So let's see how Jesus handled Gideon's complaints. We go to verse 14. The Lord looked at him and said, "Go in this your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" This is really the scary part. You know, when we face problems, God frequently doesn't let us off the hook. He doesn't come in and save the day always. Frequently, he does what any good parent does. He gives us the tools we need to deal with the problem. He empowers us to deal with the problem. As Paul told us in Philippians 14, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. No, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. It doesn't say he does all things because he loves me. He lets us do things and strengthens us to do them. So he gives us the tools, he empowers us, But he also pushes us to act, and that's very scary to me. Pushes us to act, and this is where faith and trust become important. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew what you needed to do and were afraid to do it? Well, I've been there many, many times. And this is where faith and trust enter into it, to take that step and deal with that problem, knowing that God is with you, that He's empowered you, He's given you the tools, and He's pushing you right into that problem. I want to just point out again that verse 14 says, after Gideon lays out his complaints, it says, the Lord looked at him and said, go in this your strength. The Lord looked at him. This really shows beyond any doubt that Gideon was talking to God. It was God that was speaking to him in the form of the pre-incarnate Jesus. So with that awesome experience of having God talk to him, we move on to verse 15, and this was Gideon's reply. He, Gideon, said to him, O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house. So God Himself tells you, I've sent you, I'm with you, go deliver Israel. And what I say is, yeah, but. My family is the least in Manasseh, the tribe of Manasseh. His family was the least. And if that's not enough, he was the youngest in his family, which made him the least in his family. So he's basically saying, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm the lowest of the lowest. So the implication of that, what he's really saying is, go find someone else. So how many times have we said, yeah, God, I know you want me to do this, but I'm the lowest of the lowest. Go find somebody else. Have Doug do it, David do it, Mike do it. Don't ask me to do it. I can't do it. Now, at this point, when we are focused on the story rather than focused on ourselves, we might say that Gideon is a faithless nerd and a wimp. A faithless nerd and a wimp. But unfortunately, if we were in that position, that would be the initial response of most of us. Send someone else. Don't send me. I'm not up to the task. I'm lowly. This is Jesus' response. But the Lord said to him, once again, it's the Lord speaking directly, a decided change in focus in this passage. But the Lord said to him, surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man. So Jesus comes in for the second bite, so to speak. He lays it out for Gideon, O valiant warrior, I'm with you, go out and get him. Gideon gives all his excuses, yeah but. And so Jesus comes in for the second bite. He's given him the tools for success. He says, surely I will be with you. So Gideon will go into battle with God by his side. He gives him the tools for success. He empowers him. You shall defeat Midian as one man. What would you do if God told you, you shall do something because I'm with you? You'd think you'd believe him. Unfortunately, we don't. And God is pushing Gideon. God starts out, verse 16, by saying, but, in response to Gideon's complaints. He's in effect saying, no ifs, ands, or buts. You're going to do this. So, after God gave Gideon this push, it was hard for Gideon to get started, but he did. And after he gave him the push, he actually accomplished some amazing things and did become a world changer. A couple examples in Judges 6:25 through 31. Gideon's first order, going back to what I said earlier, that his father was an idol worshiper. Gideon's first command from God was, you start by going to your father's home and destroying his altar that he erected in honor of the pagan god Baal. So you start by going to your father's house and tearing his altar down. And he did that. And by the way, he took his father's bull and sacrificed it as well. So the town people in that village came out in full force, and they were going to kill him for defiling the altar of Baal, because they were all pagans in his village. And interestingly, in the face of that, his father, whose bull was slaughtered, whose altar was destroyed, defended him. what his father said in verse 31, if he, Baal, is a god, let him contend for himself, because someone has torn down his altar. So his father defends him. Now, to me, this is an example of the power of God, where Gideon had the faith and the trust in God to go forth, knowing that Jesus was leading him into battle, and then the rest was up to God. God worked it out. God changed his father's heart. The next example, and there are many more, but the next example is in Judges chapter 7. After Gideon finally relented and obeyed God, we're told that in verses 14 and 16, as we read, God tells him, go in your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man. So finally, Gideon obeys. Well, he kind of obeys. He took his force of 32,000 men to go defeat Midian. So he wasn't fully trusting in God. He was trusting his God as long as he could have 32,000 soldiers by his side when he went into battle. We always do the same thing. We seem to have more trust in the things we can see than the God we can't see, although time and time again it's proven to us that the God that we can't see is far more powerful than the things we rely on that we can see. So in the face of this, God corrected him. He took matters into his own hands, and he forced Gideon to reduce his army of 32,000 men to 300. He said, I'll let you go into battle with 300 and you will defeat Midian. Well, Midian, we're told later on in that chapter, had 135,000 fighting men. And Gideon defeated him with 300. Also, a great example of the power of God at work. When you have the faith and trust in God to step out, to get out of the boat, to get out of the box, He will do the rest. He will empower you to accomplish the goal that He wants to accomplish. What God told Gideon in chapter 7 was, I will deliver you with the 300 men and will give the Midianites into your hands. Interesting story. Could be a Bible study in and of itself. So, like most of us, Gideon saw himself as a frightened nerd, hiding in the wine press while he threshed wheat. But God empowered him and gave him a push, gave him a big push. And despite himself, Gideon became a world changer. Despite himself, Gideon became a world changer. I don't think world changers are born and naturally become world changers. I think there is something powerful in their life that drives them to this. And in Gideon's case, we just talked about what it was. So, my question for everybody tonight is, do you want to be a world changer for God? Do you want to be a world changer for God? Are you sincerely interested in drawing closer to Jesus Christ? And do you want to relate to people the way Jesus relates to people? And do you want to make a difference for Jesus in the world? I don't know about you, but I do. I need a push, though. We all need a push. We have to resist the urge to give in to our spiritual low self-esteem, which I think is just a disguise for lack of faith and trust. When we're feeling, oh, don't send me, I'm weak, I'm ineffective, I don't speak well, I'm not effective, I can't do it. All that is really is an excuse for lack of faith and trust, that unwillingness to step out. You know, you can teach the Bible. We can all teach the Bible. We have to start by reading it, though. That's the beginning. We can minister to people in need. But where we have to start is our own social circle, with our friends and our family. And finally, we do have the resources to support the ministry effort, even if it's a few dollars. We do have the resources to cobble up a few dollars and support ministry. And if we can't do that, we have the ability to use our greatest resource to serve ministry, and that's our time. If we don't have the bucks, we have our time. And in many cases, that's far more important because it forces us, it pushes us to engage. And when we become frightened, when we get that call from God and we become frightened, I just ask you to stop and reflect on the story of Gideon, the nerd. Wheat thresher to warrior. He went from a wheat thresher in a wine press to a warrior who led 300 men in the defeat of 135,000 Midianites. And it's because the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." So ultimately he did believe in that promise, and he defeated Midian just as if Midian was one man. We can't forget that when we partner with God, God's out working in the world. He asks us to come into partnership with Him. And when we partner with God, our partner is the master of the universe. And with that power, we can't lose. We can't lose. So that's my challenge to everyone tonight, including myself, mostly myself.
Wow.
Any takers? First.
Good loud.
Yeah. Oh, Ray, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I came in a Palm Springs not lower than a spiritual alert. I was a spiritual zero coming in as an atheist. But, you know, God kept finding me until I finally found Him and decided to turn my life over to do His will, help others. And I'm not naive enough that God can change the world, but I do believe that because I'm just a dishwasher and an alcoholic one at that, but I do believe that if I just follow the St. Francis Creed prayer every day, try to, that I can try to make our little part of it a little better, maybe one person at a time. Thank you.
No, I agree with that. I don't think you have to defeat Midianites, 135,000 fighting men to be a world changer. I think if you change the world around you in your own social circle, that's an amazing, amazing change, and you are a world changer. You know, there's a pastor, a non-denominational pastor by the name of Raul Reese, and Raul was a gangbanger. And he was converted one night as he sat in his living room waiting for his wife to come home because he was going to kill her. He was sitting in the living room with a gun, and he was going to kill her when she came home. And so he's got the TV on, he's killing time until he can kill her. And Chuck Smith, Pastor Chuck Smith, he flips the station, comes to Pastor Chuck Smith, who starts preaching and makes an altar call. And he was converted. That was the beginning of his conversion. And he's become a very effective pastor. But I think his greatest accomplishment was within a few years after his conversion, the gang associates that he was closest with all became believers. And the detectives who dogged him over those years when he was a criminal all became believers. So he changed his world, that immediate social circle, one person at a time, and had that profound effect on him. So,
did you kill his wife?
No. They're still married happily.
Yeah, really.
That's a really weird story. He was going to kill her. That's what he did. I was going to kill her when she came home, and instead I got converted by Chuck Smith.
Oh, wow.
Wow, what a story.
That is, yeah.
Any other thoughts? Anyone else taking the challenge? Every one of us here are world changers. Mark?
Don't take that challenge.
Okay.
I'll take it. You started out the Bible study by talking about a scripture we talk about regularly, semi-regularly, about how man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And you also asked the question, what drives a person to become a world changer? A flip of that question is what prevents a person from becoming a world changer. You know, in my life when I was younger, because man looks on the outward appearance, I was labeled lots of different things that were not me, according to humans that were judging by the outward appearance, but God sees the heart. And thankfully God sees the heart. And I know some of us in this place, maybe we were labeled by other humans, you know, saying, you know, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, gosh darn it, you're ugly. But that's not how God sees us. And when I started to connect with how God saw me and the calling on my life, it changed what I believed, the lie that I believed about how man tried to label me and put me in a pigeonhole or a stereotype. And what I love about this fellowship is that outside that gate out there, there's a bunch of labels laying out there in the grass and on the floor because we don't bring labels in here.
Right.
And part of our work really is seeing God changing our hearts and letting God name us and not man.
Very good point. Let God name us and not man. For sure. For sure. Doug?
What would change the world is if we get like a bullet maglev train. It would go underground, so everybody would be the lowest. And it would be able to carry 32,000 people a day. And we could call the train the Gideon train.
Gideon train. I like that name. Ray Ray.
What I was going to speak on is...
Can you guys hear Ray Ray back here?
No. My belief is that, you know, all of us are unique in our own special way, so God talks to each and every one of us uniquely. And we all have a purpose in life. And my belief is once we're living in God's will and our cup overflow, that we change lives anyway, where we don't even know that we're changing someone else's life because we're living in God. So therefore, it's not, our focus is not, okay, I'm changing this individual's life or this individual's life. It's I'm serving in God, and from me serving in God, I'm going to change lives anyway. But it's not, I'm focusing on this, or I know that I'm changing the world, or I'm setting out to change the world. I'm just set out to live in God's will. And by me being set out and living in God's will, my effect will affect the world. And it's going to be to magnitudes where I'll never know who I actually affected, because each of us in here is sharing something right now that one of us may carry off to somebody in our family or a friend or something, and that family member may take that, but they don't know where it originally originated from. That's an effect right there that we'll never know. But I truly believe that once we're living in God's will, and we have God as the centerpiece of our heart, and our cup overflow, like it says, that the effect takes place where you have no idea how many people you actually touch.
Amen. I agree with that. Ray Ray, what is your world? What world are you changing in your mind? How do you view it?
My world that I view that I change is myself and my immediate family that I'm encountered with on a day-to-day basis, and my friends, you know, that I have encountered with on a day-to-day basis. But again, I don't know the magnitude of what I be doing, because they very well can take it to people I have no idea who they take it to, and it touch them. So
Exactly.
My main focus is whoever I come in contact with.
You're changing the world. You're a world changer. You're dropping the pebble into the pond, and it's creating a ripple, and you don't know where it's going. For sure. Jeff's a world changer. Jeff brings Stephanie to Bible study every Wednesday. Jeff helps everyone he can find to help. Well, this is the first time you've missed a long time, but Jeff's a world changer. You may not think you're a world changer, but you're having a positive effect on many people.
Amen.
It's awesome. It's
You know,
impressive to me. Sadiq.
There's a thing called a butterfly effect. So it's like if a butterfly flaps his wings, it creates a hurricane somewhere else. Maybe that's why we had Irma coming. Too many butterflies flapping their wings in Africa. But you never know the effect of whatever you do. I mean, when you're born into this world, there's an effect. As you go along through the day, when you stop somewhere to buy a piece of bubble gum, you never know if that's an effect that you may have. Somebody may say to you, you know what, do you have $1? And you give a person $1, and that may change that person's life, which changes 10,000 other lives. Who knows? Along the way, who was the inspiration for Martin Luther King? Who was the inspiration for Mother Teresa? How did they get started on their path to the millions of lives that they changed and touched? It just happens. So it is like that ripple in the pond that actually creates not just a ripple, but a tidal wave that create a hurricane that creates all kinds of great things that change.
I have something goes along with what Sadiq just said. And it just flew out of my head. It'll come back to me.
Well, here, let me say, because I was going to say something with what Sadiq said too. You know, I think all of us would agree that if Jesus walked into this space, there would be an impact. The reality is that for all of us to have Jesus in our lives, he is in this space. And I read something recently that I think is very powerful, that all of heaven is attracted to where Jesus is. And if Jesus is in me, then all of heaven has its focus on me, because Jesus is in me. And wherever I go, that impact is not because of me, but because he's in me. And as Ray said, that if I'll submit to that will, his will, then that impact's going to happen because he's there, not because I'm there, because he's there.
I agree with that, and I want to go one step further and say that to be a leader, you have to have influence on one other person. So if you have influence on one other person, you're a leader, and that's the first step to becoming a world changer, by influencing maybe just one person who influences others, and the next thing you know, you're part of this tidal wave of influence. Liz, have you remembered what
No,
yours
I have no idea.
Okay. Andrea.
I think Gideon's story is my story. I'm the youngest of my family. I'm the smallest of 29 cousins. I'm all of those things. And I am a reluctant warrior. He isn't just a valiant warrior, which is what God calls him, but he's also a reluctant warrior. He keeps, God tells him to do something, he's like, well, but, and I think it's really awesome that God loves us even though we do that. But what? Wait, just a second. You know, that he just keeps plodding forward with us no matter what.
Pushes us on. He pushes us on. And it's beautiful. He didn't see him whacking Gideon. What's wrong with you, fool? He didn't say that. He just kept nudging him along to his destiny as a world changer. Sally. And then Alex.
When I look at what Jesus has come here and has done, he has been the living God, which is, by example, he came here to say it's not about me. And that's what he's teaching all of us, that it's not about us, but his heavenly Father who reigns. And I feel, well, I know that we're all children of God, therefore we're all the light of this world. We're light workers. And the light it unites. And when it unites, it's more powerful when it becomes all in one. Like all of us have a light. And with that light alone, we can go through the deepest darkness. And that's all we need to reach, like a lot of, I think sometimes, I feel like I want a title here. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to be known to this world. Then I came to realize that all that matters is who I am up there and not here anymore.
Right.
So my name is written already up there in heaven.
Right.
And that's what matters to me, is nothing here. Yes, sir.
It's like Joseph Sharp said on his blog, what we're spiritual beings that are, what is it?
Yeah, he said something like,
We're spiritual beings.
we tend to think that we're human beings having a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And what we really are is spiritual beings having a human experience.
That's what you're saying. I agree with that.
Really? I never heard of that.
Yeah. We're all spiritual beings having an earthly experience. Alex.
When I look at my journey, coming from a very privileged silver spoon family, where I was showered by the presence without any love, where I was taught to be very selfish, like the part of my family who was very successful. And I'm so proud that finally I got to experience that love that I was always desiring all my life, and not to be ashamed that I work with my hands, something what my family were always telling me, if I don't do this or those study this, I will be finishing and doing the things. But I'm now very humble, and I was very arrogant. And because I was arrogant, I lost everything. And now I feel some peace and harmony, and I'm surrounded by the people. And I feel I could help people, and that is my contribution to the society, to give without asking anything in return, without any hidden agenda, just so I could see their smile and I could have that spiritual awakening that I desire, that I was missing all my life. It kind of make the purpose of my life.
Awesome. Thank you. Amen.
You know,
Hey, Dave, can I have
on that same thing, on the butterfly effect, there was this guy who got out of the Air Force after 20 years, and he wanted to go to med school, but he was in his 40s. So he applied for med school, and they said, "You're too old. So by the time you finish med school, you'll be 50, and we're wasting a spot on you." So he went about working on some things to make some money, and he invented this little box that was like one of the first computers that just had some lights on it that blinked. It's called the Altair 7, I believe it was called.
Oh yeah, okay.
And there was this guy who was at Harvard University thinking about starting his own company, but he had no money, and him and his buddy decided they were going to call this guy up because they read about it in Popular Mechanics, about this box. And at that time, they had the Sundowners Club, which was out in Vegas, and all these guys' minds were getting together, sharing all these ideas. So he called up and said, "Hey, we got a program for this thing to make it work." And he said, "Well, come on out, show me what you got to do." So he came out and showed him that. And from that, Microsoft started. The guy who invented the Altair made enough money that he went back to that med school and said, "Hey, here's the cash. I'm going to school anyway." And he went and became a country doctor and worked on all of the people in his community until he became a very famous country doctor, sort of like that doctor that was in "If You Build It, It Will Come" kind of thing, you know? And that story is a true story.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that changed the whole world in a sense. So you never know what little things lead to the next thing.
Absolutely.
I just want to say something about influence. Yesterday I came here, I thought it was Wednesday yesterday. It was Tuesday. And I look and the gate's closed, and I'm thinking, why's the gate closed? And so I look and I'm like, oh, there's nobody here. And so I look at my little phone, and it says Tuesday on it. I'm like, no wonder. And so I made a dry run, and when I go home, I'm thinking, well, at least I got to see the mountain. When I was sitting at the bus stop, there were like overhead clouds over San Gorgonio, and the San Gorgonio was gone. You couldn't see the mountain, and you couldn't see any clouds in front of it. There had to have been clouds in front of it. That's the only explanation. And it matched the sky perfectly. And I wished I had a camera. But check this out. I'm not going to let the story. It reminded me of the time another time when I was at the bus stop. It happened before. I looked at the mountain and you couldn't see the mountain. And a girl showed up, and I go, hey, you know what? Look, that mountain, San Gorgonio, it must be a volcano. It fluid stacked, and she looked, and I go, and she started screaming. And I'm like, oh, no, I was just joking with you. And she's all, where's the mountain at? And I'm all, you just can't see it, it's there. And she started screaming, and she took off. The police showed up, and they said, excuse me, sir, but you really scared that girl a lot. And that cop, two more cops showed up. They're like, we want to see who this guy is, you know? And the cops, they're like, okay, what happened? And so the other cop explained it to that cop, that the mountain, that, you know, what I'd said to the girl. And that cop looks at the mountain and he starts freaking out. Where's the mountain at? And he goes to me, where's the mountain? I go, it's there, you just can't see it. He's all, where? There's no mountain there.
Influence. Influence.
I remember. All right, so Mark and I ran into this guy one time. He's a son of some friends of ours that live nearby, and he gave Mark a book called Sacred Intersections, and talked to us about it. He said, you know, I believe that our lives are not just random. God didn't just put us here to randomly run into people, but that each time you get to know somebody, you have to ask yourself why. What does God want for Mike and I? You know, what does God want for each one of us? Why are we here? You know, why are you all in this place for Bible study on a Wednesday night? What brought you to Palm Springs? You know, what brought you here? Who are you meeting that God has some plan for with? And it's even small things, like Jerry and I've talked before, when you run across a woman at a store or somebody that you're there to help or so forth. But these are all sacred intersections, and we need to take a little bit more time and sit back and say why, you know, each time we run into somebody.
God gives us the opportunities to be world changers. The only thing that holds us back, the only thing that holds us back is that fear, that lack of faith and lack of trust. So.
Yeah, and he sent us this book and wrote a note to Mark, and he said, I believe that one of the sacred intersections may be that you're here to help my parents become believers. So, you know, he's paused and stopped and thought, like, why?
Yeah. Awesome. Any last word? Okay. Let's go be world changers.
That's right.
All right. Thanks.